Hey everybody, welcome to Fryette Central. I'm admiring our new little boxes. They're fun. New stuff. The Valvulator MINI. So, you know, we always make fun of artists that do, product endorsements, and they hold the product, like Doris Day would hold a TV dinner or something like that because they think it looks professional. I love that. So, enchilada. And this is a hot little enchilada. Actually, it's the Valvulator MINI, the evolution of the Valvulator 1 vacuum tube buffer. It's a buffer, sure. What it really is it's a way to plug your guitar directly into your amp when you're in a situation where you can't plug your guitar directly into an amp. You're plugging in through pedals, through cables, maybe with a wireless. Anything that's in the signal path between the guitar and the amplifier that isn't directly plugged into the amplifier. So what we do is we plug the guitar into a vacuum tube stage that emulates the same kind of tube stage that you reach when you plug your guitar straight into an amplifier, a tube stage first. Why is that important? Because a lot of things happen in the relationship between the pickup and the first tube, usually referred to as V1 in most amplifiers. The first tube that amplifies the pickup sound and mixes together with the harmonics that the tube generates in the process of amplifying the pickup signal. And since the pickup signal is a very low level signal and the harmonics that the tube generates are really delicate, they tend to blend and give you a little bit of a stew that you don't normally get plugging through anything that intervenes in that relationship between the pickup and the amplifier. In addition, the first tube stage usually, once you hit the amplifier with signal, the voltage inside the amplifier drops a little bit, and that contributes to the natural compression that you feel when you play through directly into an amp. So all the tubes get that little bit of a dip in the voltage, and that gives you this little dynamic presence. So this has high voltage in it, like the high voltage that's on the first tube stage in your amplifier. So you get a little bit of a dynamic feel that you don't normally get plugging through other devices before the signal finally gets to the amp. So it's basically, think of it like taking the input stage off of your amp and moving it directly out in front of everything. And then the signal goes through wherever, pedal board, and then ultimately to the input of your amp. And you just get a little bit more of a dynamic feel. It's very subtle, sure. But the other thing is that it comes out at a low impedance. And so if you have a complex pedal board, then that low impedance will negate cable capacitance and cable resistance and crappy pedal board connectors and a lot of pedal board connectors in complex pedal boards, a lot of little patch cables between all of the pedals before it gets to the amp. It tends to negate the negative effects of all those little things. Multiplied over a number of different circuits, that's a lot of little losses that add up to a noticeable loss. And this helps you erase that. It's not a new concept. It's been around at least, 20 years. And there are companies that make buffers for that specific purpose. They're usually solid state. They're inexpensive. They're small, quiet, efficient. But they don't impart that characteristic that the first tube stage in the amplifier does. And that's what differentiates this from just a utilitarian buffer thing. So this is a new generation of the original Valvulator 1, which we made tons of these things, and a lot of people still use them. And we discontinued it a number of years ago and caused a bit of a stir amongst the fans of these things. And I had planned on putting this back into production in a new form later on, and things happen, times change. Eventually, I got around to this project because it's kind of a pet project for me. Because when I first built it, I built it for me, like everything that we make. I built it to solve a problem that I have, and kind of an MO for me that I assume if I've solved a problem for myself that I know a lot of other guitar players run up against, then I've hopefully solved their problem and they become a customer. So I would be struggling with my rig, and in one particular case there was a wah-wah involved. And I love wah-wahs and I hate wah-wahs, and I'm sure that you all can relate to that because they're problematic. So I came up with this little box to solve the wah-wah problem. What do you do with it when it's off? It adds cable capacitance and it would affect the tone of the guitar, even when I wasn't using it. So I basically came up with that first to solve that signal degradation problem. And then because it needed a battery, I built it with a power supply inside it so that it would power the wah. And that ultimately became the Valvulator 1. The new Valvulator Mini doesn't have the DC power supply outputs that power pedal boards in it anymore because there are so many pedal board power supplies out there now, a large variety of them, all kinds of voltages. They're isolated, they're regulated, they're lightweight, and they do the job really well. And one of the things that was sort of in the negative column on the original Valvulator 1 is it was AC powered. So a power cord off your pedal board, off to an outlet, and heavy and large. So by redesigning the power supply, now it operates off of 12 volts. Most pedal boards power supplies can power this, and it's smaller and it's more useful. It's more useful in a number of ways. It has two outputs like the original did, and the main input, which is a high impedance input signal. The first output is grounded, and you would plug it into your first amp. If you have a second amp, you would take the second output and send that to a second amp, so it's like a built-in Y function. In the past, when you did that, you would run into a ground loop issue by having two amplifiers connected to the same input, and therefore it would start humming. So we have a ground lift switch to solve that problem. And then we also included a transformer isolated XLR out, so you can actually use it as a direct box. So that's just, hey, we had the space, we put it in there. And of course, once we put it in there, we came up against the what happens if you have a phase issue and you need to solve that. So we put a phase switch in there. Having done that, we made the phase switch active on the second output, so that if your two amps that are wired together are out of phase naturally with each other, and that happens from time to time, you could correct for that here as well. And then the last little refinement that we put on it was these load switches. Some people call them drag switches. And one of them changes the input impedance, so it will load your pickup differently depending on which guitar you're using, which amp you're using, and how you like your guitar pickups to behave. When you play with the impedance, the resonant peak of the pickup will shift to the right or the left, or up and down the frequency range more accurately. And that can make the pickup sparklier or more mid-range focused depending on the load. So sometimes it's fun to dial the guitar so that it sounds more like you're used to it, or even is a new sound that you haven't tried out with that particular instrument yet. So that's a nice little feature. And then the capacitance function is the same thing. Sometimes having the signal cleaned up too much can be detrimental because now it sounds a little too hi-fi. So you have the ability to add a little bit of capacitance back in. So once you've gotten rid of all the nasty downstream capacitance that you can't control, you can add a little bit when you need it that you can control. So it basically just puts all of those unknown variables that are out there that you have to contend with and you don't know really what they're doing or why they're there or how to fix them. It kind of eliminates all that downstream and puts them way up front at your fingertips so that you can control them and understand them and actually make good sonic use of them. So that's the Valvulator Mini in a nutshell. And we start shipping them this week, and I'm really thrilled to have them out there for you. Thanks for listening. See you soon.